You know when you have that unexplainable urge to replay a game you love? Whether it's one you grew up with and have a lot of fond memories of, or discovered recently and had a great time with. And so you're playing through it, having the most jolly old time, reliving the good old days, but then you get to that part. You know what I'm talking about, that one section of the game that's just not fun at all and always feels like an absolute chore to get through. No matter how many times you replayed it or tried to find something to enjoy about it, you just can't. I feel every game ever is guilty of this in one shape or form, which, makes sense logically, because video games are art, and, it's been said a million times, but art can never be perfect. But it all comes down to how bad this part is and the way it affects the game at large, because from my experience, these can either be mild annoyances to genuinely unpleasant experiences. Like, I've played games where I'll get to said part and ask myself if this was an accidental oversight by the developers, or if they did it intentionally just to be assholes. What? So today, I wanted to talk about those parts for some of my favorite games and how they hinder my enjoyment to varying degrees. And I should stress, these parts don't ruin the entire game for me. In fact, there are probably people out there who find them way more enjoyable than I do. Which, realistically is good, because if everyone hated the same section of a game, then that would be a whole different problem. At the end of the day, these are just my silly opinions that I wanted to share with y'all. With that said, let's get annoyed.
That's what the point of mask is! Get out of here!
Majora's Mask is a game I feel needs no introduction. It's one of the most beautifully weird anomalies to ever exist ever. I genuinely consider this to be like top 5 best games period. I need to make that list first before jumping to conclusions, but I'm pretty sure it'd be high up there. From the dark and unsettling atmosphere to the numerous unique and multi-layered characters, the regions you explore, the side quests to complete, oh my god, it's insane. In fact, I've made it a tradition to revisit Majora's Mask every summer. Whether it be the original, the 3DS remake, or whatever system it's easiest to play on. I can say with confidence this game is an almost uninterrupted joyride from start to finish. With that said, I'm not a particular fan of the Great Bay. This is a segment that's never resonated with me even on my first playthrough, and I think there are a number of reasons why that is. For starters, everything feels annoyingly spaced out, especially when going after the Zora eggs. How not only are they split up in the Pirate's Fortress and Pinnacle Rock, but if you don't have enough bottles to carry them all at once, you'll need to drop them off at the research lab and then re-enter those locations to finish the job. It also doesn't help that the Pirate's Fortress really isn't that fun, both because of how many rooms there are, and unless you don't have the Stones mask, you gotta take it painstakingly slow so you don't get caught every 5 seconds. Speaking of masks though, Zora Link is my least favorite among the 3 transformations. Sure, he's great at traversing through water, but it's extremely situational and nowhere near as versatile as rolling around in the Goron form or even skipping on water in the Deku form. Deku, I don't know. Like, I can use these two in tons of situations that call for faster movement. Meanwhile, with Zora Link, it's like, oh boy, one of the 3 bodies of water in the game. Time to go crazy. I've also just never liked how he felt control-wise. No matter the version or controller I use, it always just felt like ass. I know that's not descriptive at all, but it's better than saying shit like, oh, it has bad game feel, or it's too floaty, like all the other dweebs on YouTube who try to sound smart. So when you gotta use it for every waking second in the dungeon, it can get pretty annoying. And I want to stress, this isn't because it's a water level, because hating those has been out of style for over a decade. It's a combination of annoying Zora controls, poor dungeon layout, and a not-so-great boss. But despite this, it doesn't ruin Majora's Mask for me because of all the things you're able to do after finishing it. The next region after this is Akana Canyon, my favorite section in the entire game, as well as getting access to stuff like the Anju and Cafe quest. Not to mention, I love everything preceding the Great Bay too, so at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's basically a necessary evil that's not even that evil in the first place, more like a necessary nuisance. But I will say, this does make me consider how much I'm willing to put up with for a game I love, especially if that part becomes more glaring on repeated playthroughs. With Majora's Mask, by the time I realized I didn't like the Great Bay, I already knew some of the ways to get through it faster. Yeah, it's not as fun as everything else, but it doesn't ruin the experience for me. Also, like I said, it's not that harmful in the long run. Like, it doesn't discourage me from actually finishing the game. Will that be the case for the other games I'm gonna talk about? Kinda, not really, I don't know.
We got the morph ball, we got a Chozo artifact, and we got the charge beam!
Unlike Majora's Mask, Metroid Prime is a game I've fallen in love with only recently. Now, I've been playing games like Super and Fusion ever since I was a teenager, but for some reason I just never tried any of the 3D games. That was until Prime Remaster dropped last year, and oh my god was I obsessed with it. Since its release, I've beaten it 3 times and constantly find new things I love about it with each playthrough. That is, except for one teensy part of the game that's just not fun at all. That part being, drumroll please, and that part being the fucking Chozo artifacts. What else do you think I was gonna say? I know this is a really, really easy answer, because if you ask anyone who's played Prime before, they'll definitely say the exact same thing. But it's for good reason, since these can ruin parts of the experience if you don't know what you're doing. For those who haven't played the game, you need to collect all 12 of the artifacts in order to reach the final area. Now at first, this doesn't sound too out of the ordinary for a Metroid game, because all the other games have done similar things to this, like how you need to beat all the bosses to get to Torian in Super. The only difference is it's way easier to find a boss than a collectible hidden in some rando-ass convoluted part of the map you'd never think about checking. Like, how about the one where you have to use the X-ray scanner on this very inconspicuous wall in Phendrana Drifts that looks like every other wall in the area? Or, how about the one where you need to blow up these random boxes covering a window, shoot down this control tower that you can't even lock onto, by the way, keep that in mind, and scuttle into it to find an artifact? My point is, a lot of these can be in extremely cryptic locations, and even though the game does give you hints on where they are, don't be surprised if you have to look up a guide to find all of them. That's the biggest issue for me. I hate when games are so unapologetically complicated, it leaves the player no choice but to look up how to progress. There's no feeling of satisfaction or excitement that you were able to solve the problem on your own. At best, it's an annoyed sigh of relief that this part is finally over. And I know an argument can be made about letting the player explore the world on their own, as non-linearity and backtracking are staples of the Metroid series. But something that's necessary for progression shouldn't be this hard to find. It should be for something optional like a missile tank or suit upgrade. Because I don't want to have to use the X-ray scanner on every orifice of a region just to have a chance of progressing. This part always felt like a blatant way of padding out the game to me, which, you know, I think it would have been plenty long without it, but what do I know? As a result, it's a massive pace breaker, which is saying something for a non-linear action-adventure game. Every time I come back to this game, I always dread having to redo this part, because even though I can get some of them early, like the artifact of strength, which I actually found by complete accident on my first playthrough, I still need to resort to using guides later on so I don't get exhausted looking for them. And I'm not gonna lie, it does take me out of the experience a bit. Everything else about Prime is so much fun that it's infuriating the game's bogged down by this needless fetch quest. And given how people have complained about it ever since the game's release, it makes you wonder why Nintendo hasn't done anything to remedy it. I know someone's gonna be like, oh, they need to preserve everything about the original game even if some design choices were outdated. Okay, then explain why Nintendo fixed the Triforce hunting in Wind Waker HD. Everyone agrees that's the worst part of the original game, because just like with the artifacts, it's a needless fetch quest towards the end of the adventure that halts your progression until it's done. I know remakes and remasters are two very different things, but I'm a firm believer that if a specific part of the game has always brought down the overall experience, it should be touched up at least a little bit. My point is, the Chozo artifacts suck, and they're probably one of the best examples I can think of for that part in any game. And aside from them being needless padding and obnoxiously cryptic, it's non-negotiable for finishing Prime. At least with the Great Bay, I only need to do the bare minimum with collecting the Zora eggs, getting the hook shot, and beating the temple to keep playing. I don't need to do every side quest or optional whatever to proceed. But here I can't be like, oh, I got 4 of the artifacts, that feels pretty good to me, time to go fight the boss now. Nope, it's all or nothing. And I don't like to admit it, but this part does ruin the experience a bit for me. It's never outright stopped me from finishing the game, but it has come close. Like, there have been times where I'll get to them and be so burnt out I'll take week-long breaks from the game. I mean, dude, I've done this 3 times and I still need to look up a guide for over half of them. But for as much as I've whined and complained about it, I still put up with it because of how much I love Metroid Prime. And I know it's gonna get easier with each revisit, it's just like, goddamn, this shit sucks ass. But okay, on to the next game.
All the kids are playing this game these days. It's because they like to build brown bricks.
For the last game, I wanted to talk about one that has that part in a less conventional way. That being Minecraft. Let me explain. I'd say I'm a decently big fan of Minecraft. It's not one of my favorite games out there, but it definitely scratches the right parts of my brain. Cause, and I'm sure a lot of you can attest to this, I'll just get these random kicks to play it religiously, even if I'm just goofing around. But because of Minecraft's open-ended design, that part isn't required to finish the game. I mean, they still are, like you need to go to the Nether and fight the Ender Dragon if you want to actually beat the game. But you don't need to do those things if you don't want to. Like, you could just stay in the forest biome and build tree houses all day, or destroy villages if you so desire. The game doesn't end in a traditional sense, so you can just straight up avoid any parts that don't seem fun to you. Instead, this all depends on when the game wants to be the most annoying fucking thing possible. See, Minecraft is all about chasing highs, you know, it's like, oh, you start out by finding a cool place to build your house, and then you find some animals to get food. And you're starting to get all decked out with weapons and armor, and then something like this happens.
What the fuck? What the fuck? What's happened there?
It's like not hitting save after making a bunch of progress in an RPG, where the last thing you want to do is retrace all of your steps just to get back to the same spot. That's the thing with Minecraft, it's so easy to get discouraged once you get knocked off that high. And the worst part is, this can happen at any point. It can be after 30 minutes or 30 hours. It's all up to fate, and that's the scariest goddamn thing. And of course, there are tons of ways you can make this sting a little less. Like maybe having backups of weapons and materials, not carrying as much stuff in your inventory. Or if you want to be real safe, turning the difficulty to peaceful anytime a mob is nearby. But it still won't bring your precious diamonds back, you loser. And when that inevitably happens, I always just give up and stop playing. Maybe my will isn't as strong as other people's, but when you have a visual reminder of how much progress you lost, that just cuts deep, man. It's the same thing as in a game like Getting Over It, with Bennett Foddy, where one tiny slip-up can send you careening off a mountain you spent hours trying, strong emphasis on trying to climb. Now, I think it's a little more soul-crushing to see this than it is to lose some armor, but still, this isn't for the faint-hearted. Something I will say though, and some of you might disagree with me on this, but I don't think you need to finish a game when replaying it. Not as in completing it 100% and getting all the collectibles, I mean not even beating the final boss. For some, they may just want to revisit a specific portion of the game and put it down afterwards. Whether it's because of that part or even just straight up burnout, because I can think of tons of games where that's the case for me. Portal, Mario Odyssey, Terraria, these are all great games, but I rarely ever finish them because by the time I get halfway through, I've already had my fill. Maybe that says something about me, like I rushed through the experience, but I don't know, by the time I put them down, I usually feel pretty content with what I played. Now, who paid me to say that? This can definitely be said about Minecraft, as I feel it can be really easy to get burnt out, even if you are going after the bosses and stuff. Does this mean it's a bad game? No, unless Mojang doesn't get their shit together. I think it's more of a too much of a good thing, where even though building stuff and adventuring sounds like a lot of fun, you realize that's all you're gonna do no matter what part of the game you're in. So you inevitably get burnt out and put the game down for a while. Again, it's not calling Minecraft bad, although I think this can morph into a larger conversation about open world games not having satisfying endings, but that's for another time. Whether you're like me and call it quits after a really stupid death, or play till you run out of steam, Minecraft is an interesting game to replay. No further comment, that's all I have to say. Alright, that's enough complaining for one video. Like I said before, every game has that part, and whether substantial or not, it is part of the experience. Would it be awesome if they weren't, or at the very least tweaked in future releases? Oh, absolutely. Prime would literally be a 10 out of 10 if it weren't for the artifacts. They could literally cut it down to 6 and I'd be a happy camper. But until that day comes, we just gotta accept that they're part of the game. And I feel with some of these, if you were to take them out completely, it just wouldn't be the same game. Majora's Mask wouldn't be the same without the Great Bay, or TF2 wouldn't be the same without the Pyro. Again, the Chozo artifacts are different, but in general, these parts make our games what they are. As always, if you guys have a that part for your favorite game, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Maybe my favorite part of a game could be someone else's least favorite, or vice versa. Like maybe someone's favorite level from Sonic CD is Wacky Workbench, or they love Kelp Forest from Battle for Bikini Bottom, or the Doc Robot segments from Mega Man 3. I love how oddly specific these are. Anyways, everything and everyone has a little part to them that sucks. No matter if it's big or small, that's just how it is. yeah, that's your moral of the week. That'll be $9.95. But yeah, I don't know, that's all I had. See ya!